Welcome to the Emptive podcast, where we chat about cloud-based solutions that make selling your e-commerce products easier, more profitable, and effective. In this episode, we're covering information overload. What is it? How much content can the human brain really absorb? And what does this mean for the modern online shopper?
So let's just start right in. What's information overload?
Right. So I think, it's this influx of media, content, information, it's sort of pouring in. We get it from our cell phones, TVs, smart things, notifications. Everything's beeping, buzzing. It's flying in, emails. It's this constant stream of information, and it's difficult, right? And that's posing some challenges for the human species, right? Where a lot has changed over the years.
Yeah, it's getting harder. That's for sure. I can't keep up.
Yeah. So there's some different numbers out there in exactly how much information and data we actually consume, putting it into like an actual physical number that we can analyze.
Yeah, give me some numbers. What do you mean?
Yeah. So some say 100,000+ words each day, which that's equivalent of 23 words about a second in like a 12-hour period of being awake, which is close to 34 gigabytes of information. Then some say that we process 74 gigabytes of information a day, which is equivalent to like 16 movies, which I would argue like that, like 16 movies, like that just really depends on like how they're compressed, right?
Yeah,
like,
which movie, right?
Yeah, and how long it is. But I get it. I get to make it tangible, like how much information.
You're already overloading me with too much information, John.
Right. I
can't remember.
Then there's some information out there that it's increasing steadily each year at like 5%. I would argue that it's multiplying though, right? So like each year we create more. There's some statistics out there on like that we create X amount of more data each year. So I would guess that number has to increase exponentially as kind of we go on.
It seems to be moving faster than that, but I could see 5% being a number.
And you had a really cool stat about kind of people years ago, like the equivalent of what it is now.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I can think even in my lifetime, but yeah, what's that stat?
Oh, I think you were saying 500 years ago. So that's 74 gigabytes that we were talking about, like processing 74 gigabytes a day, is the equivalent of what somebody would have processed in their lifetime, who was somebody who was very educated 500 years ago.
Wow.
So not that long ago, I mean, in a day versus an entire lifetime. It's just crazy.
Yeah. So of that, I see, how much do we forget though? See, that's the other part. I mean, you might be saying what I get in, but I have to say, especially as you get older, I've noticed you just start letting go and you don't remember these things because there's just not enough room, right? So I don't think it forget more than.
I don't think it's just indicative to age though, too, because I struggle with that. It's extremely difficult.
But I'm saying age, as you get older, you keep piling more onto that pile is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
You're getting so much on that pile, you have to let something go. So, yeah, I mean, so how do we handle it, John? I mean, what's the answer, right? We can't stop the floodgates are open, right? There's no stopping it. I mean, I've read some self-help stuff online. Again, added more shit to my pile.
Right.
But I've read about how to get more off my pile all the time. I mean, there are tips and tricks. Do some of them work or?
Well, so humans are like innately, like we're very adaptive, right? And so we have pre-installed with some of these different tools that we can use. One of them is selective attention. And over time, we've evolved to pay more attention to things that are very good or very bad. Usually in this space, it had to do with, in not in ancient times, but in a long, long time ago, it had more to do with like a tiger jumping out at you. And like, okay, I remember this because this means I was going to die if not. Now, or really good things like, oh man, we found a beehive that had all this honey in it, which is like a once in a lifetime thing. So you remember the good and you remember the bad. A lot of it is a survival technique. And a lot of that stands true today.
Yeah,
Um,
we talked about it before. You remember the good commercials and the really bad ones, right? We talked about it, I think, in our
right.
last episode, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
There's kind of a interesting study that I was reading about that we can kind of relate to. We're going to relate it to shopping as we go on, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it real quick.
Yeah. Okay.
About how the brain has a hard time holding attention to things when it sees something it likes right before having to make a decision. And this is kind of interesting when we're thinking about like online shopping, because you're seeing tons of information, not just on the site you're shopping on, but also before.
Hmm.
So how you get to a site can also, like how you got there from the ad, can also kind of put a taste in your mouth. We know that already, but um, it can affect how that person makes a decision. So the study
I got you.
showed boring content, boring pictures to people, and exciting pictures. How they determined this was through like another study. I'm not going to get into that, but essentially they showed pictures of ice cream and pictures of like cactus and other things that were deemed boring.
Okay.
Um, so now they show those pictures, and then they had them perform like these tasks or these quizzes after, and they found that people perform significantly slower after they saw the images of ice cream.
Hmm.
So
Really?
that yeah, and they did more than just ice cream. It was a series of different things. The ice cream's like the coolest and easiest example, especially for
Hmm.
kids. They found it was
Yeah, I
even more
imagine. Right. I'm
distracting.
sure it would be right. Very
Yeah.
distracting. Yeah. They
Um,
now want the ice cream.
and then, so how do we sort of like, how do we process information now? Like, what are some things that people do to kind of like help process information in pieces? One of them is chunking. And that's sort of like phone numbers. We do that today, right? We break it up into the area code, then the other three, and then the
Oh,
four
chunks of
numbers.
data. I get you.
Right. Chunks of
Chunking of
data. Yeah.
data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we had
Um,
in the military was acronyms. Right. Everything's
right.
or I guess in corporate IT, I see it a lot too.
Oh, for
Everything's an
sure.
acronym. You just speak in acronyms one after another, and if you're not part of the club, you won't understand it anyway. But
Right.
it just shortens everything down to the 5 things you're going to do. And I guess that's kind of moved into texting a little bit, right? Because instead of typing all that, you can just type in LMK or something like that, right?
Yeah,
So
I think that's also interesting too, because it's a form of a new language in some respect,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
it's representative of a larger set of information, and we use that all the time, right? Like a
Well, that's what
word
shorthand
means
was.
something.
Remember,
Oh, that yeah,
shorthand,
shorthands.
cursive writing.
Yeah,
They don't even teach cursive anymore. But yeah, I mean, they were all shortcuts to try to speed things up or make it more into chunks, right? So you could
right.
shorthand was just chunks, right? And just a
Short.
different
We know
language.
it's,
Yeah.
my mom actually knows shorthand. Like she learned it in school, like to
Right, they all did. Yeah, I
secretarying.
mean not all, but a lot of people do. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like another language. It's
It
crazy.
is. It's
It's like
breaking it down
symbols and
into
like
little
shapes.
pieces. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Um,
So I think it
I
works, but it's not going to help us. We can't get through all this data by adding more
right.
acronyms. I mean, I can barely keep up with the ones that I see on the day to day basis. I think it's actually hurting more because now I have to go over and look them up online and what the hell this acronym is, right? So it's not really helping me. But
And also the number of products that like we have available to us on like at our
oh yeah,
fingertips with online
oh
shopping is
oh,
insane. Like
it's in. Well, yeah, I mean,
20
I was
years
saw one.
ago, so
Yeah,
different.
I, I was reading somewhere that the average supermarket had, I guess back in when I was a kid or something, back in the 70s or
19
80s or
yeah,
something.
197 hold on, I have it 1976. Yes, that's from the
Oh,
stat.
is that the stat? Okay,
Yeah,
it was
the year
four.
1976.
Well, that was a bicentennial. Okay, well, yeah. So there was how many products did it say were in there? I remember.
9,000 products in the average grocery store. And now I think they said
That's
in
like a convenience
2013 or
store now.
14.
That's like a 7-Eleven, right?
What does that
That
even,
wouldn't even
I couldn't even tell you what like 9,000
uh,
products looks like in
like a
my,
7-Eleven, maybe.
I guess. But
Yeah,
in
that's kind of funny.
2014, The average
Mhm.
amount was 40,000. So
Mm,
from 9,000 to 40,000.
yeah, it's just too much, right? And that's what's happening online. I mean, if you want to bring it back to online
Yeah.
shopping, or just even the sheer volume of information and things is just it's just too much. I don't think we can. You ever go into a Home Depot and try to find a part? You can wander the
Yeah.
aisles for days. You know.
But I kind of like that. And that I think that that's changing
True. That that might
the
work
way
in the
that we
retail
shop.
store, right? I'd say in
Right.
retail it's still a good thing. Keep this customer in the store. Keep them. You know, they'll buy more. You will. You'll add more to the cart, and you'll walk around and have a good experience. I don't think that works that well on online. I would have to argue. It's kind
Well,
of
I
the
think
opposite,
yeah.
right?
I think that is kind of what's changing is
Yeah.
like the mentality used to be keep them in the store long, keep them there, have them peruse, they'll buy more, have them
Right.
look, analyze the products. But now we're finding
Shopping's
online,
leisurely, right? Yeah.
right? That's not the case, and that has a bit to do with some of the psychology behind. When you're in a store, you're less likely to be distracted because you're kind of focusing on a task. It's
Hmm.
very tactical. You're usually touching or looking. It's got
Right.
a lot of sensor input, right? When you're at at a computer, it's often seen as or a mobile phone sitting there. It's often seen as kind of like being like a time suck, time waste.
Yeah.
So and it doesn't tap into that hunter gatherer mentality, which like we're very good at. And I know you and I have talked a lot about that on this
Yeah.
podcast,
We've
like
had
just some of
yeah
the rudimentary human
human
instincts.
right.
Yeah. So um, when a shopper comes to your store and they're definitely more likely to get distracted by one other things around them, but also the other options that are on their phone, notifications coming in.
Yeah.
And there are some tactics stores can use to help this. Um, Putting products in categories is usually very
Yes.
helpful.
Huge. Yeah.
Right. The problem with
Uh,
that is sometimes the categories within themselves can be overwhelming. And so like
yeah.
it
Or too broad or
it's
too
tough.
specific. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's too
Or
much
you
for
want
the
to
brain to
combine two.
process.
Sometimes you want to filter two categories and you can't too. You know, I want this one and that one, and the
Right.
system doesn't allow it. Yeah, it's frustrating.
Or you don't fully know what you're looking for because you're not really educated on the product line.
That's
And
huge. Yeah.
then it can cause a lot of consumer confusion. Let's say they
Yep.
order the wrong product, then it's like low satisfaction because like they're not happy with it. And it's sort of kind of it's not great, and it it creates something we say
It's toxic.
decision
Yeah.
fatigue. When you
Hmm.
have to make a decision, it's very taxing on the brain. So it kind of like it creates more of those decisions when it's an ambiguous when they have ambiguous choices, and it doesn't satisfy the customer's need to purchase something. It sort of just confuses them, and then they get decision fatigue, and they sort of get
I
out.
have one that I don't know if other people have, but I'll just say it. It's my so if I buy something local, you know, and eating any store, and I maybe it's something I have to go home and try on or try it out, you know, or something, you know, it's a part or something. I don't have such a fatigue about it or a anxiety as I do online. And I know, oh, you could always mail it back and blah blah blah. I can show you around my house how many things don't get mailed back, don't
Right,
get
right.
taken back, receipts are lost. And so I get anxiety about buying online a lot, even with all the greatest return policies they have in the world. It's just a pain in the rear, you know.
Right.
Whereas when it's kind of a local level, I feel I can get in the car and drive down there. So my anxiety is far less on a physical store than it is ordering online. I think I have the amount of information I have to know, I have to be sure of, I should say, to order online is a much higher bar than if it was just a physical store. I
Yeah.
could go down and run it back, or I've done that. I've gone to the store 5 times for something, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you can't really do that online. So I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out. That's anxiety. Did you have that same problem? Is it just
Sometimes
me?
for me, I have a hard time with like when I want to do something that's like I like doing like maintenancey stuff, like house
Mm,
stuff.
hmm.
And I find that if it's something like I need a piece, I call them like bips and bops, like things that you don't have an exact name for it really,
Mm,
but you're like I need this to fit here or connect this. I have to like physically touch it. I have a pretty good like spatial understanding. I'm like, I can see that working online, like in that space. I'm like, I need perspective, and it's so tough to sometimes get like
Right.
what, how big is that? Where does that?
Perspective is a problem. Yeah, that's a big
Yeah.
one.
Um,
Well, so with all this data and all these problems and all these products, right? And we know there are some tactics we could use, right? But they're not really useful, I would say, in the e-commerce world. You know, we're all experiencing that crunch. Well, what can we do? What are some of the things that an online retailer can do to help? Just some basics, right?
yeah. So I think something that you and I have talked about too is there's this time pressure, right?
Mhm.
And this sense of this isn't really a tactic necessarily. This is just kind of like what it creates, right? And then you need the solution for the time pressure. Um, that a lot of people are short on time, right? And
Yeah,
as we experience this
that's so true.
pressure,
Yep.
it creates a sense of urgency and anxiety, which is kind of like what you were saying a minute ago, like, okay, like, oh my gosh, like I need this. Um, and then customers try to make decisions quickly, and
Hmm.
that can oftentimes backfire. They're just getting like fed up and they get exhausted, and they go, just pick this one, and they just pick it, and
Or they don't, right? Or
it's not
it's
great.
information overload, and you just put it away, which is usually what happens with me.
Right, right,
I just refuse to pick, so I'll do nothing, right? Too much, I'll do nothing.
right,
I would say a lot. It's either or, right? One of those two
right.
things. But neither of those are pleasant or good for either the retailer or you, right? Neither of those are really
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
So something you always say, I hear you say to customers a lot too, is like really think about your product line. Like, do you need to split it up that much? Like, you can show less products to your customers.
Right.
Like, you don't
Yeah, it's a
always have to
huge
show
problem.
that many.
It's probably, I'd have to say, one of the number one things that I argue with, customers and clients, and I just never seem to win the argument. But because there's always that desire to show more, I got to show more, I got to say more.
Right, right,
And instead of breaking it into bite-sized pieces. And I think the logic is they figure, well, I got to give them all the information so they can have all the
right.
pieces to make that decision you said. But on the other hand, I don't think they realize that when I look at it, they're so too attached to it. But when I look at it, it's just like, oh, there's no way. 1,200 words. I mean, who's going to read that? And then even if they got through that, well, you have 14 products. Now they got to start comparing them. I mean, just think of the calculations that people have to do. You're better off. I've always told them just to break it into smaller pieces and maybe
Right.
direct them to begin with. But it's very hard for a lot of the retailers that I deal with to understand that concept, and for a lot of good reasons. But I think that they don't see it from the consumer's point of view. Maybe that's the
Yeah.
yeah.
And also goes into like the mentality of like information overload. Like presenting more information is oftentimes perceived as a good thing because you're
Right.
giving them access
Yeah,
to it. But
but they
in
don't
this world,
realize
as we're starting to realize, like we're getting way too much, so like you need to select the features that are
too much
important
of a
for
good
me
thing,
to make my
right?
decision. Yep.
It's too much of a good
Right.
thing. Yeah, that's what I mean. They like, well, I have to say all this, and I have to tell them, and I have to, and I have. I had this argument just the other day, and I was just like, 1,200 words was the blog post. That's not a blog post. That's even not even a page, right? I was just like, what are you talking about?
Mhm.
Then it was, instead of, there's 4 products, but they decided every version of the product. Like, so now there was like 14, or again, I don't remember the exact number, but I was like, okay, why did we even have to go down that? Well, each version has a slight variation. I'm like, oh my goodness. But you know what I mean? There was much better ways to break that data up.
Yeah, yeah.
And it just, but you're right. They wanted to make sure they gave the customer everything. And I get that. But the problem is probably the customer looked at that page and ran away as fast as they could, because there are some customers who would dive in and read it all. And I'll agree with that. But most of them wouldn't. They wouldn't have the time. Like you said, maybe they are trying to read it, but then something's coming in, another email, and then their sister called, and then, they're never going to get through it anyway.
Right.
You wasted your time, and now you've wasted their time, and
There are ways and tactics like that you can use to kind of like show that content,
right,
like
peace,
still make that content accessible
right,
if that individual wants to kind of like dive down into
dive.
them.
That's why I like the accordion. That's what I recommended, that they bury the content And then as they went down, if somebody clicked on it, they could open it up, and it would be more. The accordion probably saved the internet a little bit because it can make it look smaller, for
Yeah,
most
you say
people.
bury, I say nest it. Nest it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, different tactic. But um, so anyway, what other things can a retailer do,
yeah.
John? I mean,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
else? Because there's some basic tactics here. We just went over a couple of them, but
Yeah, you talking about the content, like create content that adds value, not distraction.
right,
Reduce the amount of choices. Like you said,
yep,
less is more.
less is more, short and
Make
simple.
easier checkout process and make them
Hmm.
reduce the amount of things they have to fill in, like address. Having those autocomplete addresses are on point.
Yeah, it's
Um,
huge.
Leveraging social proofs effectively.
Yeah, here's one I like, this tactic, and I've been using this one more and more and trying to. So let's say you want to say a bullet point, or you have a little blurb about a product, and you really remember, you have this. There's always those 5 things you want to get across, and then those 15 other things. You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, you can't always get them all. Well, one of them is to use your social proof. Find that somebody who said one of your bullet points in their their uh, description of your product, right? And use that. So you're kind of leveraging both. You're combining it. So now I think you have a better win there. You've combined the information, but somebody else said it, not you, not on the page, right?
Oh,
So
interesting. So are they saying this on social media or somewhere else?
right.
Like where are they saying? Okay.
I'll give you I try to give you a great example. Like trying to think of a product that is and it's very tastes great, right, or something like that. No, that's
Okay.
not a good example. Made in the USA would even be one, right? It's something that you might stick at the bottom of something, but somebody might actually put that into their product. I've been looking everywhere, and I finally found a good product made in the USA, or something. So now you're using that social proof to make the statement that you really wanted to make, and you don't have to write it; it's already there. And I think it works better than if you wrote it, right? So I know
Okay.
those
So
aren't really
okay.
great examples, but you see what I'm getting at. It's trying to reduce the amount of content by using the parts. You always want to use some social proof. But when people come in there with social proof, oh, this is a great product. I never thought it doesn't really mean much, right? It's kind of like fluff. Okay, you gave it 5 stars. But maybe that person, look for the ones that actually have the nugget of something that you really want to hit home. And then you don't
Okay.
have to put that on there. You can use the social proof.
I think maybe I have a good one.
Okay,
Maybe somebody who
probably
like
better.
lives somewhere where it's like cold
Hmm.
and like that like okay the weather in northern Maine and you're like oh wow these boots were perfect for the fishing boat in northern Maine.
Right. Perfect. Yep. Now you
That's
got your
like
point across. Right.
yeah like
But
you
you
okay
use
we
the
you
social
can
proof.
conceptualize what northern Maine is like. You've seen it in movies maybe like you get it and then
Yep.
yeah cool okay
It's just a trick. I think it's a good tip, but it depends if you have enough, reviews to work with. But
yeah
the other one is not to. Everybody wants to always make it. Got to buy now. Coupons, quick, 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 quick. Right? Do
rushing the
this. Put a
customer
timer.
yeah
Put another timer. Put another timer. That does work if the customers really know what the product. Maybe they reorder the product all the time. Maybe they come back and order it. That works. If it's a complicated product, it backfires like crazy because all you're doing is making them more frustrated. They're like, you know, I've seen that one backfire
right
just because they're trying to make people make decisions too fast on a complicated product. So
yeah
if the product's complicated, don't do that. You're just stressing everybody out.
And we've talked about this before, like the idea of like creating that sense of urgency. And I think what we're finding is
It's a
that
good
like
thing.
our
Yeah,
it can be, but like arm them with the tools like to make a quick decision, like a
correct.
quick informed decision, as
Yeah, that's
opposed
kind
to
of what
like
I'm
creating
saying.
that.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like creating urgency, but not giving them the tools is just a recipe for disaster. As I guess a
Right.
better way
Right.
to put it. But I've seen it done way too many times. Like they throw up the counter, got to buy it now. You only have, but people haven't even had a chance to read it. So it's kind of like, well, and
Right.
then maybe there's so much in there that you just cause them a lot of anxiety, and you're not
And
going to
like
win.
it's a $400 product, or like
Right, right,
like
right, yeah,
it's not like a $10 thing. It's just
yeah.
like oh okay, shoot, now I have to rush to buy
Yeah.
it.
The urgency works with specific products and specific times, and you have to know when to use that tool. It could backfire miserably. I've seen a lot of bad uses of it. That's all. I'm just going to leave it at that. Um, what else? I think those are some of the bigger ones that I can think of. Let's see. We could talk about maybe how machine learning impacts it? Do I know?
Yeah,
Because I think
definitely.
there's some new stuff coming, right?
Yeah, I think so. How we can use machine learning to sort of um, reduce the information overload. I think there's kind of a two prong
Right.
approach. It's the store owners can use it to process, analyze their product data and customer data, sales data too, right? All of it, their e-commerce data, right? I should have just said that, to kind of like paint a better picture and provide the products that are the most important with the best features to their customers. And then on the other
Hmm.
end of it, we can have these smart machine learning technologies that can then help consumers make better decisions actually while they're shopping. And we'll kind of like get to some of these too as we go on.
No, there. Yeah, I think you're right. There's some, just like, and there's some basic tactics. There's some basic fundamental things that I think machine learning and AI can do to help. It's all about big data, right? You know what I mean? It's you know,
Right,
um, so we've heard the term big data, and
right.
so if it's going to crunch some big data, is it better? That's I would have to ask. So you'd say, well, in machine learning, it's going to help me with this process of all this information overload. Am I just going to give it more data to do that? Is that their approach? Um,
Well, is it also? It's not always like more data, and it's not always the amount of data, but it's also the quality too, right?
correct.
And I think
Yeah.
that's something
Yeah.
that you and I have kind of been talking a lot about. Um, there was for a while, and there still is this, hoard all of it as much as possible, and we do say stuff like that, but it also is important the type of data and the quality of it. Um,
Yeah. I think
that's
early
something that's
on it
often
was all
missed.
about just data, right? And now I think it's more. I think the argument can be made that it's now at a point where the programming is kind of pretty good, but now you got to give it the right data, to help with this situation. Because I think it'll help with any data, I would think, but it's really going to help with very specific data. This information, or in other words, I guess what I'm saying is it can't help with all information overload, but it can help with very specific tasks, and if done very
Yeah.
well. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So let's talk about a few of the tasks, like finding trends, right? Those are easy, right?
Yep.
I would think to be excellent at it, and the better data you gave it, the better you're going to find trends. That's kind of a good example, right?
Right.
Um,
Shopping trends, patterns in the way products are purchased, the time of year, the location
the
that they're being
association of a
purchased,
product, yep.
how they're connected. Yep.
So if you just threw a lot of data at it, it'll still give you those answers. But if you threw very specific data at it, I think you're going to get better and better results. That's sort of what I'm saying. How about inefficiencies? I think I've been reading more and more how it can actually find the problem instead of always going for the positive. It can also go for the negative. Where are some of your pitfalls, your inefficiencies? Where are some of the problems in maybe your workflow or your customer experience or UX?
Right.
Maybe you can find those. So people always think of it looking for the better, but it could also look for the other.
Well, and also too,
Uh,
like if you're thinking sales, you increasing sales, maybe it's not always increasing the sales, but like also decreasing the inefficiencies that
right,
like could be a huge piece that could save you a
right.
ton of money.
Yeah, I mean, it maybe doing better with the sales that you have, or the actual number of customers, but doing better, more efficient. I think one of the new ones that I've been reading about is maybe it's a little bit early on for e-commerce, but is really about executing plans and keeping things online and on track and
Okay.
analyzing things. Um, and I think we see some of that, John, in like even in hosting, for example, for e-commerce, or where alarms go off when something's gone off of the rails, right? So there's something out there kind of watching for those pitfalls and executing something because of it, right? In the old days, the alarm would go off and you'd have to get up at 3 in the morning and go reboot the server. Well, now the alarm goes off, but the AI reboots the server. You know what I'm saying? Something
Right,
like
right.
that,
But not
right?
just,
So
it also like intelligently analyzes like the real data that's
the
coming in,
reason, right?
not
Yeah,
just like running scripts. It's
correct.
thinking about,
It's
also like actually analyzing it and making more calculated
mhm.
decisions as opposed to just like restart and reboot.
That's
Um,
correct, right?
yeah.
Um,
Which is
it
funny
can
because back like not even that long ago, you would talk about like we had servers that were in a physical space, and then
Oh
you
yeah,
have to
yeah,
like call over to the company and have somebody go
yeah,
turn it off and turn it back on, like a hard reset.
yeah. That wasn't that
um,
long ago. Yeah, it
right,
wasn't.
right. So,
Um,
what are
mhm.
some, maybe like we'll spend the last like couple minutes here kind of going through a couple like
Yeah.
of the examples, maybe dreaming a little bit. I have one, we've talked about it a lot before, like the virtual personal shopper,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of like helps shoppers like make a decision and reduce decision fatigue. But I think there's a really important kicker here. It's not chat, and it doesn't require the user to input information in a traditional sense of typing or voice. And I know that
Mm.
like we love voice, we love typing input, right? But they're finding that like that is taxing on the brain.
I was going to
Whereas
say
if
that,
you
right? Yeah, it's more information,
present
isn't it? Mm-hmm.
options, right? And they can select options, it's
Mm-hmm.
less taxing. And then you can kind of like help them make decisions by presenting them with options in a smart and intelligent way.
Correct. Yep.
Another one is we've said this before too, product recommendations, but also the correlations between those products and
Mm-hmm.
making the connections for the user so that they don't have to save them kind of the
Oh
processing
yeah.
power.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times when we shop, we don't shop for just one product. We shop for like a group of products that solve a problem or create something. Like you buy a computer or an iPhone. And when you buy an iPhone, maybe you buy a case and you buy a charger or some other
Right.
accessory, the things that go in the back of your phone so you can put your foot, pop it, or put your finger in it to hold it. Like we don't always, a lot of times we buy groups of them, right? And they go together.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can make those correlations for customers, and there's a lot of that now, right? Like you'll say, "Oh, add this to your cart." Some of them aren't great, but some of them are. Um,
Yeah.
and I think in the
Yeah.
future there's going to
Well, I think
be
you're definitely reducing you're giving them positive suggestions in the right direction. They don't have to go look for something because you've already
right.
reminded them, right? I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the problems with today is how we present that. It's oftentimes an area, right? And then what happens is that area sends you to another page and to another
Yeah.
product. And
Yeah.
I find that like
Bounces
that
in and
is
out.
not how you shop. Like it doesn't make sense to completely throw away what you have. It's almost like it should take you in stages, right? Like you're adding it in. I think Apple's done a pretty good job with this when you kind of put your iPhone together. When you're
Mm-hmm.
like purchasing it, it's almost like a timeline, and you add the items in, you pick the color, you pick the side, then you add the accessories. So it's definitely getting there. I think we're going to see a lot of that in the future.
Yeah, I think so. I think the future of e-commerce with what you're talking about, is the smarter way of displaying the search. To me, search and filtering aren't really all that right now. They're not really intuitive. There's some better examples, but a smarter assistant and a smarter way to ask those questions would definitely go a long way. And I think it's around the corner. I know that some of the work you're doing, but also I've been seeing some of the stuff coming out where I think they're really trying to hone in on that to reduce the fatigue that you're talking about. The consumer fatigue
Right.
of trying to find something. It's in certain. I think it's different markets, right? Too. I think it's different. Um, car buying a car online now, it's totally different, right? So that would be another
Yeah.
good
Right.
example. But what about for the retailer? I mean, how would all the information that you'd have to do as a retailer, a store owner? I could think of a couple things that I found that were really fascinating, which are out there today. You could do. There's some companies that'll look through your reviews and pull out fake reviews, and even hunt down fake reviews on other sites for you.
Mm.
If you have products like on Amazon and some other stuff. And then what was the other one? It was similar to fake reviews. It was counterfeit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they like if you sell a certain product and maybe it's your product, and it's you do put it on different sites. Well, maybe there's some counterfeit versions of it, and they use AI to do. There's no way a person. I mean, they could sit there all day and hire some interns to click buttons all day. But I mean, in a sense, that's something perfectly designed for for AI and machine learning to go out and scour the internet and come back with
Right. It's
results.
probably going to do a
And
better job too.
oh yeah, and it probably could submit the copyright stuff to the right, especially like to Amazon. Um, Another one would be localizing, trying to get more local with stuff, right? Because I think the AI might know the weather. We talked about this one in the past,
Right, right.
So I know I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that, but I know where you're at based on your localization. So I might know the weather, or I might know the season, I might know something's going on. I mean, there's a lot of that I think is,
Yeah.
we can get into that with very specific things.
Yeah,
Um,
and I have one that kind of piggybacks off of that, which
no.
is going to be interesting in the future, like wearable technology and
Oh yeah.
IoT, Internet of Things, where it's like gonna understand your body and be tuned to your body and help you make decisions that for about products that are best for you, like
Mm,
biometrics that will understand how your size, your let's say your body makeup. So maybe when you're trying to purchase vitamins or you're trying to purchase food, like kind of giving you real feedback. And there's kind of like a little bit of that now with like wearable technology, like we're getting some information, but we haven't really applied that into a ton of
yeah, I don't think
consumer
it's quite
purchasing.
matured yet, right? I don't think it's matured that full
Yeah,
cycle. Yeah.
I'm sure
um,
it's out there. I'm sure we could find examples, right? But like you said,
yeah.
it's not mature yet. It's not fully developed. I think because of some privacy concerns.
Well,
We've talked
yeah,
about
that
this
always gonna,
before.
yeah, that's gonna block it a little bit.
See, I think you're going to need that third party in the middle who's going to leverage what information you pass off and what information you don't. Like, I don't want to give a company my entire biometrics, but maybe I just need to
No.
pass off my calcium, right?
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
It's down to. I found one though that I thought was pretty interesting, unrelated. It wasn't what our typical, product based customer, but it was a company, Wayblazer, that did. So you would give it your personal information on a trip or something, and not like the trip advisors that are out there, but it would actually do, using the AI, go out and try to find the right things for you. And here's the important point: what is the weather? So it's not just recommending that you go on a Jeep tour when it's 30 below out. You know what I mean? It's going to be
Right.
smarter than that,
Oh,
right? It's not
interesting.
just
Cool.
randomly grabbing things. Like, I think that's what really happens right now. It just, but it would be smart about what it presented back to you. And I thought that was a great example of how AI could, using the technology, they're still selling you products, but they're bundling them, I guess, right? But they're custom bundling it to you, and you had to give them some personal information. So that
Right.
was a good example. Yeah, I like that one a lot.
And so I guess we could go on forever, right? Like, but
Yeah, I
what do
mean,
we tell
there's
people
never
kind of
enough.
in closing about this when you're thinking about e-commerce and information overload and how we can kind of make it easier for shoppers?
Well, I think the first thing is, I mean, there are tools and tricks you can do today, right? First
Right.
of all, you have to recognize there's a problem, right? So we know there's a problem. I think everybody would agree to that. And then we have to talk about, well, what could I do just looking at my current situation with what I have? What am I doing wrong? We just talked about a few examples of that, and there's
Right.
many more. We can post a few online for people. I don't think we did enough dive there. But then I think the future is coming. I think the machine learning is going to really help out here. It's going to help the merchant and the customer. We talked about a couple of examples there.
And have the conversation. Bring it
Yeah,
up in your
bring
meetings,
it
even
up.
if you
Yeah.
leave a 5-minute piece at the end of it on how you can use it. I think it'll be definitely valuable in the future.